He's somebody who essentially utilizes music for social causes. He's somebody who's put India on the global map when it comes to music. And yet, he's the only guest. He has been the only guest who has been here, seated, listening to other guests before his time, not just one speaker before, but multiple speakers before that, and sitting and listening and saying, Rishabh, you know what? There's something to learn from everybody. This man has met everybody from the Prime Minister who appreciates him and calls him the voice of Indian music, all the way to people across the world who praise him. And he was right here in front of us, silently waiting and listening for his chance to come up on stage. It gives me great pleasure and privilege to be able to welcome somebody who, I'm on a small way, took over the British Parliament, and we organized an event in the British Parliament. This man he went to the United Kingdom and he conducted a British orchestra. If there is a person who is redefining the word India's international icon, it is this man. And he's come all the way from Bengaluru just to talk to you. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, Ricky Kej. Ricky, thank you for doing this.
Oh, absolutely an honor to be here.
Which side is the good side? That side or this side?
I think your side's pretty good.
But let me ask you this, that most of us are bathroom singers. How many bathroom singers here? No, you can't be a bathroom singer, man. You can't win a Grammy and say I'm a bathroom singer, that's not fair. But he's composed music locally, nationally, internationally, and for most of us who are bathroom singers, I must ask you this on behalf of all the bathroom singers. When we go into the bathroom, we start composing music. We don't know what it is. Yeah, how many of you do that? Yeah, same. Like, we don't know the tune, we don't know the beat, but we start composing. There's a process, perhaps, to composing music, and it is definitely not the bathroom singing process. Is there a process, is there a method to the madness? I ask this, the only parallel that I can think of, and in your space, of course, yours is a very different thing, but the only parallel I can think of is A.I.M.U.N, and when I was interviewing him, I asked him this question, he's on our board, and I asked him, saying, is there some method to the madness in the sense that how do you continue to win these international awards? How do you compose this kind of music again and again? Is there a method to the madness of Ricky Kej?
Yeah, that's quite a question actually. But for me, music is something that comes naturally to me. I'm very bad at languages. In fact, the only language that I can speak, somewhat properly is English. I can barely speak Hindi, and my mother tongue is. My father is from Rajasthan, I do not speak his language. My mom is from Punjab, I do not speak her language. I live in Karnataka, I barely speak any Kannada. But for me, music has always been my language. Music has been the way that I communicate with other people. If I want to spread a message of awareness about something, I do that through music. If I want to celebrate something, I do that through music. And ever since I remember, I've always been a musician, even as a small child. I do not remember a time when I was not playing a musical instrument. I was always playing some sort of a musical instrument, or I was always obsessed with listening to music. And even when I would play a musical instrument, I was not trying to play a song. I was not trying to play a Bollywood song, I was not trying to play a famous pop song or whatever. I was always making my own music, and I was trying to express myself through my music. So I was always I was always writing my own songs. I was always writing about things that I felt very strongly about. So music is basically everything to me, and it's a natural way of me expressing myself, and that's what I do even today. I just express myself through my music, and that's what ends up winning awards.
Don't try this whilst you try to compose in the bathroom. is what I would like to say.
But the bathroom is a good place to compose music because the door is locked, nobody's there to bother you, it's quiet in there.
You know what? Thank you, Ricky, for humoring me. But to all of those who are interested in music, how many of you are aspiring to do something in the field of music? How many of you want to sing, compose, play an instrument? Raise your hand. Right. Now, what are the different career options? You know, it's traditionally it used to be singing and composing, but now it's opened up. Can you throw some light on the different career options for anybody who hopes to pursue music?
Now, of course, there are a lot of career options for people who want to get into music. But before that, since we are being specific to our country over here, that is India, I'd like to start a few steps behind that, because there is this myth in India that if you want to get global recognition all over the world through your music, then you need to make music which is in English, or you need to make music which is Western pop music or Western forms of music, which is completely untrue. Because the actual musicians who have gotten global recognition from India are the Indian classical musicians and musicians who are actually creating music which is within our traditions and within our culture. Like, for example, Pandit Ravi Shankar, Ustad Zakir Hussain, Shankar Mahadevan, you have Anushka Shankar, you have Fazal Qureshi, Pandit Hariprasad Chaurasia, Pandit Vishwamohan Bhatt. All of these musicians have won international accolades, and they have made music which is true to their own roots and true to their own origin. Now, when in India, for us, the major music that we consume is Bollywood music. All of us listen to a lot of Bollywood music. Even I listen to a lot of Bollywood music. I love Bollywood music. And when I was younger, I would travel abroad quite often, and I would travel to especially the United States. And when I would go to America, I would watch these concerts by Bollywood musicians all the time. And these Bollywood musicians were able to fill up complete stadiums, with their audiences. Complete stadiums, complete theaters, complete auditoriums were filled up with audiences. But the only people who would come to those particular shows were people from the Indian diaspora. That is, the Indian people who would be living in America, or the Indian people who would be living in all of these various countries. Because Bollywood, even though it is extremely popular, it has not actually broken cultural barriers. It's only we Indian people who are listening to Bollywood music, wherever we are in the world, but we are listening to that kind of music. But then I'd gone to a concert by Pandit Ravi Shankar. Now, do any of you know who Pandit Ravi Shankar was? Which instrument did he play? Okay, shout out. Which instrument did Pandit Ravi Shankar play? Come on. Sitar, correct, okay. How many of you knew that it was sitar? Okay, few of you knew sitar. Okay, he has a daughter. Do you know what his name is? Do you know what her name is? The daughter's name? What's her name? Everybody knows, Anushka Shankar. Okay, so you know that he's a sitar player, you know that his daughter's name is Anushka Shankar, you know that he's the greatest Indian musician ever in the history of music. But can anybody name a single album of his or name a single song of his? Yeah? And Pandit Ravi Shankar has won 4 Grammy Awards. So people outside of India are appreciating him, even though he's playing Indian music. He's playing the sitar, he's playing pure Indian classical music, but people outside have appreciated him and given him 4 Grammy Awards. But we in India don't know any of his music, we don't know any of his songs. And he's released 70 albums. But we in India have not listened to him because we are busy listening to Bollywood. So it's not wrong to listen to Bollywood. We need to appreciate all forms of music, but at the same time we need to appreciate our own forms of music. So coming back to my story, when I had gone to America and I watched this concert of Pandit Ravi Shankar in San Francisco, what was very surprising is that the audience in that concert were basically completely American people in that concert. It wasn't, the audience was not Indian people appreciating what he was playing, which was Indian music. It was American people appreciating his music, which shows that there is something terribly wrong with what we are doing. Like, I do not make Bollywood music at all. I do not make film music at all. I only do independent music, which is very Indian music that I create. But when I tell somebody I'm a composer in India, the first question I'm asked is which film did you compose music for? Because everybody feels that if you are a musician or you are a composer, then you're composing music for a film. You cannot compose music which is not outside of film. So there are lots of career opportunities where you can be composing music for television, for all the television shows, all the shows that come on Netflix or Amazon Prime and all these other OTT platforms. You can be composing music for television commercials, that is the ads that are on television, even the ads that are on radio. You can be performing live concerts across India. You can be performing within orchestras. You can be an instrumentalist. So there are many, many career opportunities, but the only difference between having a career in music and any other career, and being an engineer or being a doctor, is that if you have a career in music, then what happens is that you have to make your own career path. Because if you have studied, let's say, to be an engineer, then you know what your career path is. You have to go through 4 years of college, then you'll probably be campus selected, then you get a job, and then you rise up the ladder, maybe do an MBA a little later on, and then you become you get a senior position in your company and all of that stuff. But when it comes to music or any art form, then what happens is that you have to make your own career path. You have to figure out exactly what you're going to do, and that's why the hard work becomes a lot more. So I would say a career in the arts or a career in music is very, very, it's a very good career. It's a very fulfilling career. It can also pay you a lot of money, but at the same time, you have to be extremely hardworking.
You have to be extremely hardworking, and that is so true of music as well, and all different disciplines that we've spoken about today. Yes. But most people's music journey begins in the music period in school.
Yeah.
Well, there's a music class in school that you have. Yes, and a lot of people's first brush with music is the annual day function in school, which some of us like me are compelled. And therefore, today when Mukesh Batra was speaking, and he started singing, and he said, Rishabh, join along. So I took the mic, I put it on the side, and then I was like, because I can't sing to save my life. But Ricky, my question to you is this, that do you have any such memory back in school? Did it start for you in school as well? Or do you have any memory of an annual day where you were made to sing or perform or use instruments?
So as I said, I've been a musician all my life. I do not remember a time in my life when I was not playing a musical instrument. So through my school years in Bangalore, I was always playing a musical instrument. I was very obsessed with music. But at the same time, I had an issue in my school, if I have to be candid about it. The principal of my school, his son was also a musician and who was in my class. And that is why, unfortunately, he would get all the opportunities and I would get none. But that's the way the world works. So my actual, professional career in music and my actual opportunities in music happened after I left school. But at the same time, it's in our 12th grade, as we all know, that we have to make a very strong decision as to what we want to do for the rest of our lives. Am I right? Yeah. So for me, when I finished off my 12th grade, my parents knew that I wanted to be a musician, but they always felt that I'm going to take up some sort of a traditional degree, and I would be doing music as a hobby. They never felt that I would want to actually do music as a profession. So at the end of my 12th grade, when I went to my father, who's a third-generation doctor, I went to him and I told him, Dad, I want to be a musician and I want music to be my bread and butter, my hobby, my profession, my everything. My father was extremely furious and he was very, very angry. So there was a lot of drama at home, a lot of fighting at home, all of that stuff happened. And then my father and I made a compromise. We made a deal with each other that I would finish off a degree in dental surgery. That is a BDS degree. I would finish off a degree in dental surgery, and only after I got that degree, my life would be my own, and my father would never question me again for the rest of my life and let me do whatever I wanted for the rest of my life. So I went to 5 years of college. In the evenings, I was doing music professionally, so my musical professional career had already started because I would go to college at 9 o'clock in the morning, come back at about 5 o'clock, from 6 o'clock to about 2 a.m. in the morning, I would be at some studio recording music and creating music for a television commercial or creating music for an album. And then I would sleep for about 4 or 5 hours and then repeat the cycle every day. So I did that for 5 years, and at the end of 5 years, I did not know anything about dentistry, but I got a degree in dental surgery. and then of course, after I got my degree, I gave it to my father very ceremoniously, and I told him that, that dentistry is a very noble profession, and I do believe it's an absolutely noble profession, very important profession, but it's not for me. So I told my father that you can keep the degree, and and I'm not going to practice even for a single day. Now, instead of doing music in the evenings from 5 o'clock to 2 o'clock in the morning, I'm going to do music 24 hours a day. But if you think about it, I just wanted to say this, that if you think about it, that if I had gotten, because my dad, I do not blame him for making me do a degree which I would never use later on in my life, because he was basing his decisions on fear. Fear of me failing, fear of me starving to death, fear of me not making money, fear of me not getting married into a good family. These are the fears that he had. Whereas for me, my decisions were based on my passion for music. But imagine if I was fearful, and at the end of that 5 years, if I thought that, oh, maybe I should open up a clinic, and maybe I should go to a clinic from 9 to 5 and treat patients and make some money. So I would have opened up a clinic, gone to that clinic from 9 to 5, I would be treating patients all day, and all that I would be thinking about while treating patients is that when can I go back home and play on my guitar and play on my piano. So I would be a very frustrated dentist. In that kind of a situation, would any of you like to come to me to get a tooth extraction done or to get some kind of a surgical procedure done on your teeth? Absolutely not. So that is why I feel that passion is extremely important. You should not be in a profession that you do not like, because that's not good for yourself, that's not good for society, and that's definitely not good for the country. So I believe that try to do something that you love doing, and I think even if you're not successful at it, you'll just be happy.
We saved a lot of teeth.
He saved a lot of teeth and lives.
And you impacted so many lives in a different way. But Dr. Ricky Kej, that's impressive. That's very, very impressive. So, Ricky, if I may ask you, and when you had to convince your dad, you didn't convince your dad, you went ahead and you told your father saying, look, I will finish dentistry, I will become a dentist, and then I will go and pursue my passion. You were like the ideal kid. Like you were like the son that my parents didn't have. What?
No, the ideal kid would be my older brother. My older brother is a dentist today. So even now when I go to family functions and like a wedding or something like that, and my father is with me, and relatives come running to me and say that, oh, Ricky, congratulations on your 3rd Grammy Award, and I love your music, and I've been listening to your music, and we're such big fans of yours. So my dad comes to us, and then he points at me. He's like, but he's also a doctor. One track mind, parents.
No, but this is great. The fact that you actually did all of this, and you are unabashedly unashamed and saying that, I did A, then I did B. I had to stop at that B. I had to tell them saying, okay, now I've done this. So my question to you, Ricky, is this: that a lot of people keep saying, go and pursue your passion, make it your profession, and forget the academics, forget the mundane degrees, etc., etc. If you were to advise them, and that they need to convince their parents not to do those stereotypical degrees and to do a rather different vocation, would you tell them to listen to your father, or would you tell them to go and pursue their passion?
I would say pursue your passion, because it's a funny story that I told you, and it's nice to get a couple of laughs, and also it may seem motivational, but if you think about it, I did that dental degree, and because of that, there was one person who was probably standing in line who was passionate about being a dentist, and that person did not get a seat in dentistry. And India as a country lost out on one additional dentist because I decided to do that degree and then later on, shift to music. If I had to go back in time, I would obviously prefer to do a degree in, I would prefer to spend that time, studying more about music. But at the same time, I would say that if you're taking up a career in the arts, especially when it comes to music, you obviously have to be an extremely good musician. You have to be a really, really good musician. But at the same time, that's not enough. You have to be three things. You have to be a musician, you have to be an entrepreneur, because you're constantly selling something and what you're selling is yourself and your own abilities. And the third thing is that you have to have leadership abilities, simply because making music is not an isolated art form. You need to interact with a lot more other musicians, with orchestras, with other band members, with studios, with record labels, with marketing teams. You also need to collaborate with filmmakers. So you need to have that leadership ability. So you have to be a really, really good musician. You have to be a really good entrepreneur, and you have to be a really good leader. Now, if you are unable to convince your parents that that you're a good musician and you can take up a career in music, if you're unable to convince your parents, then how will you convince a million other people that you're a good musician?
Or you could make them meet Ricky Kej.
So that is what. So basically, if you are not able to convince your parents, or if you say that I'm scared of my parents and I don't want to talk to them about this, or my parents will not listen to me, if you're not able to convince your parents that you're a really good musician, then maybe the profession is not for you. I mean, it's a rude way of saying this, but you should be able to convince your parents, because if you're able to convince your parents, only then you'll be able to convince a million people in an audience that you are a good musician.
You need to be able to convince the people who love you first.
And people who know that you are a good musician, first of all. First convince them.
Correct. And then go on and convince everybody else. But Ricky, this brings me to something which you said. It's very interesting. You said that as a musician, you need to work with a lot of people.
Yeah.
In school, we have school projects. And in these projects, we have to work with a lot of people.
Yeah.
Do we have to work with a lot of people?
Yes.
Sometimes we're not assigned our friends.
Yeah.
Sometimes we are assigned people we don't like. This has happened to me. Has it happened to you?
Yes.
So Ricky, my question is this, that, as a team leader, as a person who has to get things done, as the school project has to be graded and your life depends on it when you're in school, how do you take along that team member that is a little more different in thought and perspective than the rest of us? I'm just very politely calling that person Draco Malfoy. So, if we have to call that person Draco Malfoy, example, Draco Malfoy? Harry Potter? Yeah, okay, 5 people. But, so how do you deal with that person?
So whenever you're working with people and life puts you in these situations where you need to collaborate with people who you do not necessarily like, or people who you do not necessarily agree with. Sometimes they're people who you like, they're friends of yours, but you probably do not agree with them. Now, there is where your actual artistry needs to come out, simply because you need to understand where you need to put your foot down and say that what I am suggesting is the correct way to do it, or you need to understand that this is a pathway where I can actually compromise and I can say that, all right, let's do it your way, and I be the bigger person in agreeing to that compromise. So there are multiple ways to work about this. I can give you one example. So my last album that I did, which won me 2 Grammy Awards, it was an album called Divine Tides. So it is an album that I did with this gentleman called Stuart Copeland. You can read up about him later on. Stuart Copeland is said to be the greatest drummer in the history of music. He's a 72-year-old gentleman, a complete legend. Already had won 5 Grammy Awards before he had met me. And he was the drummer of the band The Police. I don't know if any of you have heard of this band. But nevertheless, he's said to be the greatest drummer in the history of music. So he's a legendary musician. I grew up having posters of him on my walls. So that's how I grew up. I was a huge diehard fan of his. So I got in touch with him and I asked him that if he wanted to do this album with me. He agreed, so it was the greatest moment of my life that I got to work with him and do this album with him. So while I was working on this album with him, up until then, I was always in control of my music. I was the one who was deciding everything about my music, as to what instrument would go, what the composition would be, how the music would sound, where it would be played. Everything was decided by me. But here, I was collaborating on a 50-50% basis with an absolute legend. So my working style had to change, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So what I did was that I made a decision with myself that every time Stuart asks me to do something that I do not agree with, okay? He asks me to do something that I feel in my mind that it will not work. I will do it even then. Whatever he asks me to do, I will do it. Even if I feel that this is completely wrong, I will still do it. And I will live with that decision for 2 weeks. So I will let it cool down with me, you know? Because sometimes you make these very rash decisions. So I let it cool down with me for 2 weeks. And at the end of 2 weeks, if I still feel that Stuart was wrong, then I will voice my opinion and I'll tell him, Stuart, probably this decision was not the right decision, maybe we do it another way. So there were numerous situations during the 1 year that we were making this album, or Divine Tides. During that entire 1 year, there were many, many times, there were at least 20 to 25 times where he asked me to do something like add a flute over here, or add a guitar over here, or raise the volume of the drums. So he would ask me to do things, and in my mind, I would think that this is definitely not going to work. What he's asking to do is completely wrong. But then I would do it, I would live with it for 2 weeks, and then I would realize that he was correct. Because I would live with it for 2 weeks, and it would simmer in my head, and then I would start realizing that sometimes you fall in love with your own ideas. Many times you fall in love with your own ideas because you are a control freak, you know. You love your own ideas that you cannot understand somebody else's perspective. But if you give it time, then you can sometimes understand something from what another person is thinking about, you know, from another person's perspective, you can understand that. So that's what I did in this case, and in every single one of the situations, I realized that Stuart Copeland was right, and I thank God that I did not voice my opinion, because I realized that 2 weeks later, I just agreed with him. So that is the beauty of collaboration, that there has to be compromise, you have to show a lot of empathy, think of things from the other person's perspective. And if all of these things do not work and you still believe that your way of doing things is right, then you have to take an artistic decision, you have to put your foot down and say that you have to do it my way because I'm 100% sure that my way is the correct way.
I usually say something. There was quite a story, man. I'll tell you why, because you spoke about somebody who is a legend. I've only read about him and heard about him from my friends who are into music. When you collaborated with him and about your Grammys, I'm aware. But I didn't know this backstory. And this backstory is so compelling because he said, and just to paraphrase, he said that every time there was a dispute, every time there's a fight with you and your friend, he waited for 2 weeks, he internalized whether this is the right decision. He then went to Stuart and then told him, saying, look, no, this is, your way is the right way. And eventually you got 2 Grammys after that. But the fact that how many of us actually give ourselves more than, and hand to my heart, and I'm going to say this, that, you know, whenever something happens, we always take an impulsive decision, right? Like, when somebody comes and tells us saying, nahi kar sakte ho. Like, kyun nahi? Karke dikhaoga. The impulsive decision to take, and the fact that to be able to wait, to be able to process that, and then eventually to take a decision is like a monk-like is a monk-like feeling, which is really, really impressive. Huge round of applause, man, to Ricky.
No, but the other thing also, thank you. The other thing also that just to add on to that is, when given a choice to collaborate with somebody, when given a choice to work with other people, one secret that I have had, of course it's not a secret, I mean that you will see it in all my albums and all of my work, I only collaborate with musicians who are better musicians than me. So basically, if you look at my previous albums, if you look at an album like Winds of Samsara, the first album of mine that won a Grammy, there were 120 musicians on that album. Each and every one of those 120 musicians were better musicians than me. If you look at Divine Tides, Stuart Copeland and me, Stuart Copeland, obviously a legend, a better musician than me. There were, I think, 150 or 160 musicians on that album. Every single musician on that album was a better musician than me. Because then that is where you learn how to remain humble and you learn from those other musicians. And especially in my case, because I'm composing the music, so these musicians and these amazing musicians, they take your composition to a whole new level by their expertise. So that is why it's always important, whatever field of work you may be, always try to work with people who are better than you and learn from them.
You know, there's one similarity, and in a very small way, we are only a fragment of what you actually do. In a small way, we try to take India to the world. With young people organizing these conferences to spread Indianness in a Peru or in a Colombia, in an Uruguay. And one of the things that we see out there, whether it is Sri Ravi Shankar or whether it is Pandit Ravi Shankar, these are people who speak to people out there and they resonate with them. And one of the things that I've seen is that music is such a unifying factor. Ricky, what makes music, in your opinion, something that can cross boundaries and bring people together? And what should young people do when it comes to the field of music to be able to unify small fights, if at all any? Can they use music in a way in order to deal with day-to-day problems?
So music is always said to be a universal language. Everybody says that, oh, music is a universal language. It's quite a cliche to say that. And the reason why it's a cliche is because it's absolutely true. So I had one one very, great event that happened in my life. That there was this Algerian violin player, from Algeria, lives in Algeria. And I was a huge fan of this violin player. And I wanted to collaborate with him. So I flew to Algeria. And I sat with him in the studio, and the only language that this violin player knew was Arabic. And I could not interact with him because, as I said, my languages are pretty bad, so I could only speak to him in English. He could only speak in Arabic, and there was basically zero communication happening. And our cultures were so vastly different that even sign language was not working, so there was no way for us to communicate with each other. So it was a very frustrating experience. That for about almost an hour and a half, we were trying to communicate with each other, but we were unable to communicate. Then, when I almost gave up on this recording session and I thought that this is not going to work out, there was a piano lying down over there, so I sat on the piano and I started playing some music on the piano. And then this Algerian violin player, he picked up his violin and he started reacting to the piano and he started playing the violin. And then we just went on playing, and then we ended up we ended up jamming with each other for about 2 or 3 hours. The recording engineer in the studio recorded it, and that ended up becoming the song. So when there were language barriers, when there were political barriers, when there was a barrier of cultures, of traditions, of ideologies, of philosophy, I could not get through to the person at all. I got through to the person through music. By playing music. And that is why music is a beautiful force that can unify people. If you think about the national anthem, for example, the national anthem of India or any other country, every country has got a national anthem. The minute you listen to the first few notes of the national anthem, it evokes a certain pride of our country and it brings the whole country together. Whatever religion you may be, whatever caste you may be, whatever skin color, whatever geographic location within India, it just brings everybody together. Because that's the beauty of music. Music unites everybody.
Music unites everybody. And what you said about music being an instrument or a tool in order to break barriers is something that is very important. But I must ask you this as well, that when you talk about music and you talk with such passion, how important is it for young people to be passionate, but at the same point in time mindful of the way they come across? Because I've seen a lot of young musicians at close proximity, and I've seen them to be very different from you, if I can humbly put it. I see them just before coming up on stage, they are they're not in the most abbreviated state. They are they indulge in nefarious substances, um, and essentially the meaning of Coke is very different from Coca-Cola. But what I'm trying to say is, Ricky, when somebody thinks of music, when somebody thinks of musicians, and especially when one thinks of Western music, when one thinks of Western musicians, the first thought that comes across, and the people that I have also met, is that they're always indulging in all of this, and therefore they say that, Rishabh, this gives us, a sort of scientific or a sort of inspiration to produce the music, and therefore that's how they explain it to me. But I've spoken to you right through, and the previous occasions that we met, and there's not an instance of drug abuse. There's not an instance of anything nefarious. What is your message to young people when it comes to finding your passion, but also being a good role model? You're a classic example of that.
So I can tell you about myself. So in my entire life, I'm 42 years old right now. In my entire life, I've never sipped alcohol in my life. I do not even know what it tastes like. Not a drop of alcohol in my life. Not even a rum cake or something like that. Absolutely no alcohol in my life. Never ever touched a cigarette in my life. Never touched any kind of substances like drugs or whatever, but I'm still able to make music. And that is because in today's times, there's a lot of technology in the creation of music. A lot of technology is used. Computers, softwares, DAWs, plugins. There's a lot of technology used when it comes to music. Also, the way music is consumed nowadays, it's through streaming platforms, and so music has become a very clean medium right now. So if somebody were to think that alcohol is going to enhance their music making ability, or drugs is going to enhance their music making ability, it's the exact opposite. Because one has to make music in today's times with a clear mind. You have to be absolutely professional, and you have to have a very clear mind when you're making art or when you're making music, because that's the way the world works right now. So I would say that any kind of substance abuse, anything that is harmful for your body, is not going to work for your music. It's going to ensure that you're not going to be a successful musician.
And it's not going to work. It's not going to work in any discipline.
In any discipline.
In any discipline.
But I can say with full authority when it comes to music, but I'm pretty sure that it's not going to work in any discipline whatsoever.
Great. And therefore, my last question is a small rapid fire, after which we'll open it up to the audience to ask you questions. The first word that comes to your mind when I say the following words. Okay. Music in advocacy.
They go hand in hand, because one thing that I've not told you during this talk is that the only kind of music that I make is about sustainability, the environment, and celebrating Indian culture. These are the only three kinds of. That's why you won't see me ever making a Bollywood movie. You won't see me ever making an item song. The only kind of music that I make is about these topics, which are very close to me and very dear to my heart.
Yeah. Ken, very few people who I know would come and say, I'm not going to make music for something that makes me 100 crore, and I will make music for something that I believe in is right and is going to make society better. Very few people will say that. So really appreciate you for doing what you do. When I say Instagram music, is it soul music or trend chasing?
So I believe that any platform that can so I would say it's trend. What were the two things that you mentioned?
Soul music or trend chasing?
I think it's trend chasing and soul music, simply because any platform that can give notoriety or give recognition to a musician is a good platform. And right now, a lot of people are discovering music on Instagram rather than on other platforms like Spotify or YouTube. So I think Instagram is a good platform for musicians, because it's a good way to showcase your music in the short reels of about 90 seconds. And then hopefully if people like the music, then they will listen to the full length piece of music on Spotify or on YouTube. So I like Instagram a lot. Yeah.
Do you guys follow him on Instagram? If not, you should.
Yes.
Don't forget to follow me. It's the important thing.
Both of us.
Two people are nodding, nobody else is interested. But Now, when I say environment, Ricky, what's the first word that comes to your mind?
The first thing that comes to my mind is that we are part of the, and we are part of it. We are not away from the environment. Human beings are part of the environment, so we are part of the entire ecosystem. So I would say, since you asked for one word, I would say responsibility.
When I say Wild Karnataka, what's the first word that comes to mind?
So Wild Karnataka was a film that I did music for. So I would say Wild Karnataka, the most popular animal in Karnataka is the elephant. So that would be the first word that comes to my mind, the elephant.
When I say youth, what's the first word?
I would say empowered, because the youth today is empowered with a lot of access to knowledge and a lot of access to information. So I would say empowered.
When I say India, that is Bharat, what's the first thought, first word?
Forever home.
We've been to all of these wonderful places, but home is where the heart is, and that is India.
That's absolutely India, Bharat.
And the last one is my favorite. When I say India's international movement to United Nations or I.I.M.U.N, what is the first word that comes to mind?
I think essential.
How sweet. If we had a hamper, we would give it to you. Well, it's been an absolute delight to be able to, it's been delightful to be able to do this conversation.